It was a Saturday morning, crisp and full of promise. I had just finished mowing the lawn, my proud suburban ritual, and was sipping a cold beer on the back porch when Emily yelled out from the kitchen window, "Rick, you forgot the hedges again. Are you allergic to trimming bushes or something?" I grinned, took another sip, and yelled back, "What's the rush? They're not going anywhere." Emily rolled her eyes, her messy ponytail bouncing as she went back inside. She was beautiful like that, even when she was annoyed with me. We'd been married 9 years, and I loved how she still had that sharp wit that had hooked me in the first place. She was my best friend, my compass, and, most importantly, the only person who could beat me at Scrabble without even trying. We weren't the perfect couple, of course. I wasn't blind to her quirks, like how she alphabetized the spice rack every Saturday morning, but left her shoes strewn across the house like she was Hansel leaving a trail for Gretel. Or how she'd suddenly burst into tears watching commercials about rescue dogs, then mock me for crying at the end of Field of Dreams. But that was us. It worked. Or so I thought. Looking back, maybe there were warning signs. Emily had started this pottery class a few months ago, something about wanting to reconnect with her creative side. It seemed harmless enough. I mean, who doesn't like a hobby that makes cute bowls and vases? And she was good at it too. We had a growing collection of misshapen mugs to prove it. The problem was that pottery class turned into late nights out. At first, I didn't mind. Gave me time to catch up on my own guilty pleasure, obscure documentaries about UFO sightings. But then, one night after she came home smelling like clay and something else, she asked me something odd. "Rick, do you ever feel like there's more to life than this?" I looked up from the couch, where I was deeply engrossed in a documentary titled Aliens or Swamp Gas: The Truth About Roswell. "This?" I asked, confused. Like us? Or the fact that NASA still won't admit aliens exist? She sighed. "No, I mean life. The routine. Don't you ever feel stuck?" I laughed it off. "Emily, you're talking to a guy who considers mowing the lawn on a diagonal a radical life choice." She didn't laugh. Instead, she gave me this long, searching look, the kind that made me feel like I just missed something really important. "I'm going to bed," she said softly, brushing past me. I stared after her, a strange unease settling in my chest. But I chalked it up to her usual artsy mood swings. Maybe the pottery class was turning her into a deep thinker or something. At the time, I didn't know that was the first crack in the foundation. That was the moment when everything we built together, our laughter, our late-night Scrabble games, our shared dreams, began to shift. I didn't see it then, but hindsight, as they say, is a real jerk. The first time I realized something was off, Emily was standing in the garage holding a leaf blower she clearly didn't know how to operate. Now, this might sound like an ordinary misunderstanding between a woman and power tools, but let me explain why it set off alarm bells for me. Emily hated the garage. She called it Rick's man cave of unnecessary garbage, and avoided it like it was full of spiders, which, to be fair, it probably was. Yet there she was, midweek, in yoga pants and a hoodie, staring at the leaf blower like she'd stumbled across a time machine. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning on the doorframe. She jumped a little, then smiled. "Oh, just tidying up." "Tidying the garage?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do you even know what that thing does?" "It blows leaves," she said, narrowing her eyes like I was the idiot in this scenario. "What else would it do?" "It's not leaf season," I pointed out. "Also, there's no outlet in here." She blinked, then set the leaf blower down carefully, like it might explode. "Well, maybe I just wanted to try something new, okay?" I shrugged and walked back inside, but the scene stuck with me. Emily had a particular rhythm to her chaos, a kind of organized disarray I'd come to appreciate, and randomly wandering into the garage for cleaning experiments wasn't part of it. The next weird thing happened a few days later. I came home from work to find her in the kitchen, staring at a half-eaten loaf of bread on the counter. She looked up when I walked in, her expression somewhere between guilty and confused. "Is this your bread?" she asked. I laughed. "What kind of question is that? We buy the same bread every week." "No, I mean, did you eat this?" I glanced at the loaf. A big, uneven chunk was missing, like someone had just taken a bite out of it instead of slicing it. No. Are you okay? She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed the bread, shoved it in the trash, and muttered something about needing to go to the store. Later that night, I found the same loaf in the trash, but this time, it was shoved under some paper towels. I don't know why, but it bugged me. It wasn't just the waste. It was the deliberate effort to hide it. By the time the third strange thing happened, I couldn't keep brushing it off. It was a Saturday, and I was in the backyard replacing a broken sprinkler head when Emily came outside with 2 coffees. She handed me one, sat on the patio chair, and stared at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "What's up?" I asked, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Do you ever think about alternate realities?" she said. "What, like in the Matrix?" "No, like, if you could rewind your life and do it differently, would you?" I laughed, assuming she was joking. "Emily, if I could rewind my life, I'd go back to that 2006 Super Bowl and bet my life savings on the Giants." She didn't laugh. She just sipped her coffee and stared at me like she was waiting for a real answer. "Where's this coming from?" I asked, finally. She shrugged. "Just curious." "Emily, is something going on?" "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Everything's fine." It wasn't fine. Later that night, I woke up around 2 in the morning to find her side of the bed empty. I figured she'd gone to the bathroom, but when she didn't come back, I got up to check. The bathroom light was off, but the faint glow of her laptop was coming from the living room. "Emily?" I called out softly. She slammed the laptop shut so fast it made a loud clap. "What are you doing up?" she asked, her voice a little too cheerful. "I could ask you the same thing." "Couldn't sleep," she said, standing up and stretching. "Thought I'd do some online shopping." "Shopping for what?" "Nothing important." She walked past me, brushing a kiss on my cheek. "Go back to bed, Rick." I stood there for a moment, staring at the dark screen of her laptop. Something about the way she closed it made me feel like a trespasser in my own house. By the next week, her late nights, working on pottery, had become a regular thing. She'd leave around 7 and come back close to midnight, sometimes smelling faintly of wine. When I asked her about it, she'd shrug and say, "Some of us unwind differently." It was the kind of answer designed to shut down further questions, and I hated how well it worked. The final straw came when I got home one day and found the garage completely cleaned out. Every box, every tool, even the old beach chairs we never used, gone. Emily was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Where's all my stuff?" I asked. She blinked at me, all innocent. "What do you mean?" "The garage. It's empty." "Oh, that," she said casually. "I thought we could use the space for, I don't know, something else." "Like what?" She shrugged. "Yoga? A studio? Something more functional." "Emily, where's my stuff?" "In the shed," she said, like it was the most logical thing in the world. My stuff wasn't in the shed. It was gone. All of it. "Emily," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "what's going on with you?" "Nothing," she said, draining her glass. "You're overreacting." But I wasn't overreacting. And deep down, I think she knew that. By then, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily wasn't just hiding something. She was slipping away. The jokes, the casual affection, the shared routines that had once felt unshakable were now like shadows of a life we used to have. I didn't know where she was going at night, or why she was acting so strange. But I knew one thing for certain. Something was about to break. It was a Tuesday when everything unraveled. I remember the day clearly because the office vending machine ate my dollar, and that small injustice set the tone for the rest of it. By the time I got home, I was in a mood. Not angry, exactly, just off. The kind of off that makes you notice things you normally wouldn't. Emily's car wasn't in the driveway. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the fact that her pottery bag, this oversized canvas tote she carried everywhere, was sitting by the front door. It was one of those details you might shrug off on another day, but not today. I picked it up, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. Curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped it. Inside were some of her usual supplies, sponges, tools, and a half-used block of clay. But tucked into the corner, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a pair of men's running shoes. I stood there holding them, trying to make sense of it. Emily didn't run. She barely jogged. And they weren't my size. They weren't even close. I put the shoes back and zipped the bag up, my chest tightening. It felt like the moment before a storm hits, when the air gets heavy and the world holds its breath. Emily came home about an hour later, carrying a small bag of groceries. She set them on the counter and gave me a quick smile. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, opening the fridge. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Where were you?" "Pottery," she said without hesitation. "Oh, you didn't take your bag?" She froze, her hand hovering over a carton of milk. For just a split second, her expression faltered, but she recovered quickly. "I didn't need it today," she said lightly, pulling the milk out and setting it on the counter. "Why?" "No reason," I said, watching her closely. If she was lying, she was good at it. Too good. That night, after she fell asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about those shoes. There was no logical explanation for them. They were just wrong. I decided to take a drive. I needed air. I needed clarity. And maybe I needed to do something I'd never done before. I drove to the Pottery studio. The building was dark, its windows blank and lifeless. There were no cars in the lot, no sign of life. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty space, trying to piece together the puzzle that was Emily. That's when I saw it. Her car, parked 2 blocks away, outside a diner. I pulled up behind it, my heart pounding in my chest. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly in the night, casting a sickly red glow over the parking lot. Through the window, I spotted her. She was sitting in a booth with a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing. Not the polite laugh you give a stranger, but the kind of laugh you share with someone you're comfortable with. Someone you trust. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there, watching from the car, my stomach churning. The man reached across the table and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. When they finally left, they didn't notice me. They walked to his car, and I saw her hesitate. For a moment, I thought she might turn back. But then she got in, and they drove off. I followed them. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. They drove to a park, one of those places with winding trails and picnic tables that were deserted at night. I parked a few spaces away and watched as they got out. He pulled a blanket from the trunk, and they walked toward the trail. I didn't follow them. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every part of me wanted to storm after them, to demand answers, to shatter the calm facade of my life. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, as the minutes dragged on. They came back about an hour later. She was smiling, her hair slightly mussed. He kissed her, right there in the parking lot, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I drove home. Emily came in about 20 minutes after me, humming softly under her breath. She didn't notice I was sitting in the dark, waiting for her. "Hey," she said, flipping on the light. "Why are you sitting here like a weirdo? Did you have fun tonight?" I asked, my voice steady. She paused, looking at me carefully. "Yeah, pottery was good." "Why?" "No reason," I said, standing up. "I'm going to bed." She didn't follow me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a storm of questions, accusations, and doubts. But one thought cut through the chaos, sharp and clear. I couldn't ignore this anymore. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. The next morning, I waited for Emily to leave. She didn't ask why I wasn't getting ready for work, and I didn't offer an explanation. She left with the same casual wave she always did, the one I used to find comforting. Now it felt like an insult. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my laptop, sat at the kitchen table, and started going through our shared accounts. I'd never been the kind of husband who monitored what Emily spent money on. But now, I scrolled through the bank statements like a detective, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything out of place. There it was. Charges at restaurants I'd never heard of. Small, frequent payments that didn't fit her usual habits. And then, buried between the routine groceries and utilities, A transfer to a name I didn't recognize. Michael Reed. The name stared back at me like it was taunting me. It wasn't a coworker I'd heard of, or someone she'd mentioned from her pottery class. I opened a new tab, typing his name into the search bar. It didn't take long to find him. Michael Reed was a local fitness instructor. His website was full of motivational slogans, shirtless photos, and testimonials from women who claimed he'd changed their lives. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The anger I'd been holding back since last night finally started to bubble over. This was it. This was the guy she was sneaking off with. While I was fixing sprinklers and cleaning the gutters, she was playing house with some personal trainer. I needed confirmation. My heart said I'd already seen enough, but my brain wanted undeniable proof. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the pottery studio. The building was empty when I arrived. The windows were dark and the door was locked. I peeked through the glass, but there was nothing inside except shelves of unfinished ceramics and a faint smell of clay. I walked around the side of the building, checking for any signs of life. That's when I noticed the side door slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my shoes scuffing against the concrete floor. The room smelled like sawdust and cleaning supplies, not the creative haven Emily had described. I wandered through the space, scanning for anything that might give me a clue. That's when I found the calendar. It was pinned to a corkboard near the back, a plain white page with handwritten notes in Emily's neat script. Most of the dates were filled with class times and reminders, but there were also a few that stood out. Dinner with M. Hike with M. Weekend getaway, confirmed. I stared at the words, my stomach twisting. The weekend getaway was scheduled for next Friday. That was when Emily had told me she'd be helping her mom pack up the attic. The sound of a car door slamming snapped me out of my thoughts. I quickly stepped outside and ducked behind a corner, watching as Emily's car pulled up. She got out, carrying her pottery bag, and walked toward the front door. I waited until she disappeared inside before stepping out of the shadows. My hands were shaking, my pulse pounding in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. I walked to her car, opened the unlocked door, and slid into the passenger seat. It was only a few minutes before she came back, startled to see me sitting there. "Rick, what the hell are you doing? Where are you really going, Emily?" I asked, my voice low. Her face went pale. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I know about Michael. I know about the weekend getaway. I know about everything." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she sank into the driver's seat, her hands gripping the wheel. "It's not what you think," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Then what is it? Enlighten me." She looked at me, tears pooling in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth, but then she shook her head. "It's complicated," she said. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're sneaking around with some guy, lying to my face, and it's complicated?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just did." "That's not an answer, Emily." "I don't know what you want me to say," she snapped, turning to face me. "That I'm a horrible person? That I ruined everything? Fine. I'm the bad guy, Rick. Is that what you want to hear?" "I want the truth," I said, my voice cold. "That's all I've ever wanted." She laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes. "The truth? The truth is, I don't know who I am anymore. I wake up every day feeling like I'm living someone else's life." And then Michael came along, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "So what now?" I asked finally. "You keep sneaking around until you decide whether or not I'm worth keeping?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I'm doing, Rick. I'm so sorry." I sat there in silence, my mind racing. This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the life I thought we had. "I'll give you what you want," I said quietly, opening the car door. "What does that mean?" she asked, panic flashing in her eyes. "It means you don't have to decide anymore," I said, stepping out of the car. "I'm done." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked away, her voice calling after me, but I didn't look back. When I got home, I started packing. Emily didn't come home that night. Not that I expected her to. After what had happened in the car, she probably went straight to Michael's place, or wherever it was they thought they were hiding this ridiculous affair. But it was fine. I needed her gone. The house felt less suffocating without her pretending to care. Instead of sleeping, I stayed up, pacing the living room. My mind was racing, fueled by equal parts rage and humiliation. 9 years. That's how long we'd been married. 9 years of putting up with her quirks, supporting her dreams, and assuming we were a team. And for what? So she could blow up our life because she was finding herself with a fitness trainer? I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. By sunrise, I had a plan. First, I pulled up the security camera footage from the front porch. I'd installed the cameras a couple of years ago when someone tried to steal a package. At the time, Emily had called me paranoid. Now, I was grateful for my so-called paranoia. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. The timestamp was from a few weeks back, a night when Emily had claimed to be out with her pottery friends. There she was, sneaking back to the house, giggling like a teenager. And there he was, right behind her. Michael. They didn't go inside. No, that would have been too bold. Instead, they stood on the porch, whispering and laughing. At one point, he pulled her close, and she kissed him. I paused the video, my blood boiling. The gall of it. Right here on the porch of my house. But the cameras didn't just record video. They recorded audio, too. I hit play, leaning closer to catch their conversation. You sure he's asleep? Michael whispered. Rick could sleep through a hurricane, Emily said, laughing. I hit pause again, my hands shaking. That was all I needed. Proof. Undeniable proof. The next step was a little more complicated. I called my buddy Eric, who worked in IT. Eric owed me a favor for helping him move last year, and I was ready to cash it in. Eric, I said when he picked up, hypothetically, how hard would it be to hack into someone's social media account? There was a long pause. Hypothetically? What kind of trouble are you getting into, Rick? Just answer the question. Depends on what you're trying to do, he said cautiously. If you've got access to their phone or email, it's not that hard. Why? Let's just say someone's been playing me for a fool, and I want to level the playing field. Eric sighed. You realize this could blow up in your face, right? Trust me, I said. It's already blown up. It took a couple of hours, but Eric came through. By noon, I had access to Emily's email and her Facebook account. The first thing I did was download every conversation she'd had with Michael. It didn't take long to find them. They were as disgusting as I'd expected. Flirty messages, inside jokes, and plans for their little getaways. But one message in particular caught my attention. Do you think Rick suspects anything? Michael had written. No, Emily replied. He's clueless. I've got him wrapped around my finger. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with rage. Wrapped around her finger. Huh? We'd see about that. I forwarded their entire conversation thread to myself, saving it as evidence. Then I took it one step further. I created a new email account and sent the messages to every mutual friend, family member, and coworker I could think of, anonymously, of course. Your affair is no longer a secret, I wrote in the email. You might want to think twice before wrecking someone's life. It was petty. It was vindictive. But it felt good. When I was done, I sat back and waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By evening, Emily was blowing up my phone with angry texts and missed calls. I didn't answer. Let her stew in it. Around 9 p.m., she finally came home. I was sitting on the couch, drinking a beer and watching TV. What the hell did you do, Rick? She yelled as she stormed into the living room. Good to see you, too, I said, not bothering to look up. Don't play dumb, she snapped. Someone emailed my entire family, my boss, and half our friends about Michael. Sounds like someone wanted them to know the truth, I said, taking another sip of beer. Her face turned red. Do you have any idea what you've done? My boss wants to meet with me tomorrow. Michael's been getting hate messages all day. You've ruined everything? Good, I said, finally looking at her. Now you know how it feels. She stood there, shaking with rage, but she didn't have a comeback. What could she say? She'd been caught, and she knew it. You think this makes you the bigger person? She said finally. No, I said, standing up. It makes me the guy who's not going to sit around and let you walk all over him. You want to blow up our life? Fine. But you don't get to play the victim when the truth comes out. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. Before I shut the door, I turned back. Oh, and one more thing, I said. Don't bother trying to delete your accounts. I've already saved everything, just in case you feel like pulling any more stunts. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. I shut the door and locked it. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. The morning after Emily's meltdown was eerily quiet. I woke up to find her side of the bed still empty, though it didn't surprise me. She'd probably spent the night sulking on the couch, or maybe she'd gone to Michael's. I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. I brewed coffee, poured myself a mug, and sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone. My inbox was flooded with replies to the email I'd sent. Some were supportive, others were shocked, and a few were just nosy. But the best ones were from Emily's family, especially her mom, Susan. Susan had always been a no-nonsense woman, and her email didn't disappoint. I'm so sorry, Rick. I can't believe Emily would do something like this. You deserve better. Call me if you need anything. I almost laughed. Susan had been on my case ever since we got married, criticizing everything from my job to the way I folded towels. Now she was suddenly Team Rick? It was poetic. By the time Emily finally emerged from wherever she'd been hiding, it was nearly noon. She looked like hell, hair unbrushed, eyes puffy, and the kind of scowl that could curdle milk. We need to talk, she said, her voice hoarse. Do we? I replied, sipping my coffee. Yes, she snapped, sitting across from me. What you did was completely out of line. Was it? I asked. Because I think cheating on your husband for months is pretty damn out of line, too. She groaned, rubbing her temples. I'm not saying I was right, okay? But you didn't have to humiliate me in front of everyone, didn't I? I shot back. You humiliated me, Emily. You made me look like a fool while you ran around with your little gym buddy. And you expect me to just sit back and take it? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned forward, her tone softening. Look, Rick, I messed up. I know that. But we can fix this. We've been together too long to just throw it all away. I set my mug down, staring at her. Fix it? Emily, the only thing broken here is the trust one had in you. And you shattered it. Her eyes welled up with tears, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered her words to Michael. He's clueless. I've got him wrapped around my finger. That guilt evaporated real quick. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice cracking. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off all contact with Michael. I'll prove to you that I can be better. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Why now? Because your family knows? Because your boss is mad? Or is it because Michael's finally realizing you're not worth the trouble? She flinched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither is what you did to me, I said. For a while, neither of us spoke. The kitchen felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted her to leave, to disappear. But I also wanted her to sit there and face the mess she'd made. What do you want me to do? She asked finally, her voice barely audible. You want to make things right? I said, fine. Here's what you're going to do. First, you're moving out. Today. You can go to your mom's or Michael's, or wherever the hell you want, but you're not staying here. Her eyes widened. Rick, this is my house too. Not anymore, I interrupted. You forfeited that right the second you brought another man into our marriage. I've already contacted a lawyer, and we'll work out the details later. But for now, I want you gone. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Second, I continued. You're going to tell everyone the truth. No more excuses, no more blaming me or your midlife crisis or whatever garbage you've been telling yourself. You own up to it. All of it. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually refuse. But then she nodded, her shoulders sagging. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. And third, I added, you're going to stay the hell out of my life. No texts, no calls, no showing up unannounced. You made your choices, Emily. Now you live with them. She nodded again, wiping her eyes. It took her less than an hour to pack a bag. I didn't help her. I didn't even watch. I stayed in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone and pretending not to care as she moved around the house gathering her things. When she finally left, the silence was deafening. For the first few days, I didn't know what to do with myself. The house felt too big, too empty, even though I'd been craving this solitude. Every corner reminded me of her, of us, of what we used to have. But then, something shifted. I started sleeping better. I cooked meals I actually liked instead of the diet-friendly nonsense she always insisted on. I reconnected with old friends, people I drifted away from because Emily didn't like them. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Emily tried to reach out a couple of times. Texts, voicemails, even a handwritten letter. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As for Michael, well, let's just say his reputation as a fitness guru took a serious hit after the email went viral. Last I heard, he'd moved out of town, leaving Emily to pick up the pieces of her shattered fantasy. I kept the house. I kept my dignity. And most importantly, I kept my peace. Life doesn't always give you closure. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. The day the divorce was finalized, I poured myself a drink, sat on the back porch, and watched the sunset. It wasn't a celebration, exactly. More like an acknowledgement that the worst was behind me. And as I sat there, sipping my whiskey, I realized something. I didn't just survive this. I won. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel